People with low level habitually interrupt. Dubon blogger at Mabulimanta once wrote about a scene where she met an old classmate. It should have been a very happy thing for the two classmates to meet again after a long separation. She also wanted to reminisce with her old classmate, but she didn't say a few words before her classmate completely took over the conversation. Next, she was interrupted by her classmates several times, which made her feel depressed. As Bacon said, people who interrupt others and interrupt others are even more annoying than those who speak too Habitual much. Interruption is a typical manifestation of not knowing how to respect others. It seems to snatch the right to speak in front of you, but in fact it exposes your shallowness and shortcomings. The writer Goffey has portrayed a similar character in his novel. This college student is usually a talkative person. When it comes to class, he loves to interrupt the teacher's lecture. Once, the teacher talked about the characteristic of Zhang Guolao in the myth that he rides a donkey upside down. The student suddenly stood up and asked the teacher, "Is Zhang Guolao walking forward or backward?" The teacher answered that it was to move forward, and the student interrupted again, saying, "How can you say you are moving forward when you are riding a donkey backwards?" Another time, the teacher explained Su Shi's evening scene of the spring river by Hui Chong, praising the phrase, "The duck knows first when the spring river is warm," as a wonderful stroke. Before the teacher finished, the student came to interject again, saying that geese and ducks are similar, so why do you say that ducks know first? For the students, it is nothing more than trying to use this method to gain more sense of existence. But in the ears of the listeners, it will only become a deliberate provocation and disrespect. Carnegie once said, "The quality of interpersonal relationships depends on what level of communicator you are. If you make interrupting a habit, you can offend people inadvertently with a few words and erase all the good impressions you have accumulated before." I have a friend who recently had a very unhappy quarrel with a colleague around him. He just started chatting with others, and his colleagues heard it and would come over to interrupt and ask if it was true or not. What made him even more depressed was that every time the supervisor came to him to communicate about work, his colleagues would definitely put on the appearance of experienced people and say how to do his work in this way and that way to be better. Not long ago, at a department meeting, when he was concentrating on reporting the product research, his colleague suddenly interrupted and asked, "Is it meaningful to do this?" When my friend was about to explain, his colleague did not even raise his head and continued to interrupt him. "See, it's not your work that has a problem, it's your attitude." The situation at that time made my friend helpless and annoyed, so he simply asked his colleague, "Why don't you talk about the customer's feedback on the product?" But the colleague hesitated for a long time and couldn't say anything at all, so he had to shut up in dissatisfaction. People are eager to be valued, but always wanting to show off their tongues will create more disasters for themselves. It can be said that the deterioration of all relationships starts with not being able to control your mouth. From the moment you interrupt the other person casually, it has crossed the boundary and established opposition and conflict between each other. You make others embarrassed and helpless, and in the end others will naturally make you lose face. Audiences who have watched Goodbye, Lover must be deeply impressed by the way Zhang Wanting and Song Ningfing get along with each other. Many times, when Song Ningfing was chatting with his friends, Zhang Wanting would interrupt him in various ways, either judging his speech ridiculous through a few words, or grabbing a small mistake in his words and criticizing him desperately. In one episode, Zhang Wanting even interrupted Song Ningfing 7 times in a row. Song Ningfing actually wanted to explain and make his position clear, but under the repeated pressure from the other party, he didn't even have the chance to speak out. In the end, although Song Ningfing suppressed his emotions, anyone could see his suffocation and helplessness. The other people at the scene also chose to remain silent with an embarrassed look on their faces. Only Zhang Wanting was still speaking strongly and talking to herself. She was completely unaware that this originally pleasant chat had already turned into a disaster because of her. The reason why a person frequently interrupts others is often due to the habit of judging others by himself. Thinking that he understood what others meant, he was eager to express his own views, but ignored a truth. Words spoken without thinking are most likely to cause misunderstandings and hurt people's hearts. The Book of Rights says, "A gentleman is careful about what he says, but a villain speaks first." Some words are not suitable for you to say, and some occasions do not require you to say more. If you have to interrupt and speak, you will not only lose your manners, but also lose your popularity. In the second season of the Chinese Poetry Conference, although contestant Zhang Miaomiao won the competition, But she was not praised for it, but instead caused a lot of controversy. The reason is that in the flying flower order segment, she was always eager to show herself. When competing with Wang Tingting, the other party just said that she slept in spring and did not feel the dawn, and heard birds singing everywhere, and she interrupted coldly. When competing with Jiang Wenye, she became even more impatient when she saw that the other party spoke slowly, and interrupted him several times before the other party finished speaking. In fact, the right and wrong of the game results are there, and the judges will make their own judgments. She had to rush to interrupt, and in the end she could only make others laugh. I saw a sentence. Behind every inappropriate expression, there is a heart that cannot be dispelled. Because I can't control my impatience, I can only vent my emotions by constantly interrupting others. But the words that are spoken are like spilled water, which can't be taken back. Too much talk leads to mistakes, and disaster comes from the mouth. If you talk too much, something will happen sooner or later. Always self-centered, you can never win the recognition and trust of others. There is a classic question on the internet: how to make others listen to you. The answer is actually very simple. You wait patiently for others to finish speaking, and they will naturally come to listen to you. When Jiang Wei was the host, he was once keen on using a witty speaking style to liven up the atmosphere and please the audience. However, because he didn't grasp the scale well, he often interrupted the guest's speeches unintentionally, and was labeled by the audience as impolite and talkative. In fact, he is quiet in private, and he tries his best to be a chatterbox on the stage, just to gain a foothold in the hosting track. Unexpectedly, not only did he fail to achieve his goal, but he also made things worse, and ended up in a situation where he was criticized. Although he felt frustrated, it was from that time that he began to understand that to prove himself, he could not rely on his mouth alone, but also on the education of empathy. After that, he began to watch the programs he hosted in the past at home repeatedly, reflecting on and summarizing the existing problems. Every time he went on stage, he would remind himself to remain restrained, answer the conversation at the right time, and pay attention to the cooperation with other hosts. After getting rid of the impatient hosting positioning, he became more and more calm and let more people see his talent as he wished. I agree with this sentence. Only when people listen to others well can they speak better about themselves. If you don't listen to a word, you will be paranoid for a long time. Learning to listen more and interrupt less is always the fastest way to maintain relationships and improve yourself. Dr. Dai Xiaoxue, who taught at Harvard University, recorded a life segment that touched me deeply. A relative's child was preparing to study abroad.